Good morning to everybody. Thanks, Chlomid, for inviting me to this very nice seminars, and thanks for all our friends, Hudi and Dan, who helped me in these last few months to establish here in Israel, EFPA Israel. EFPA is a European association taking care about certification of knowledge and competences of financial advisor and financial planner. And I'm very honored to tell you that finally we established the local EFPA to start our certification work here in Israel. The reason why I'm here today is just to share with you some thoughts about the fee-based advisory activity. If you can, okay. Let's start just from some question that a good advisor should wonder about. These are the questions that each advisor willing to work in a proper way with the customers he has is asking nowadays in Europe. The first question is, are we sure that with the actual level of interest rates, which are, as you know, very low, and for some part of the yield curve also negative, for the money market and for the government bond market, it makes sense to offer to our clients funds with a management fee equal or even higher than 0.30% or 0.50% respectively? Are we sure that in the efficient market it still makes sense to buy active funds without being sure that they would outperform their benchmark? If you put this question, maybe the final answer you will get is that it's likely that a good combination of just single government bonds, passive funds, and ETF, and a very few percentage of the portfolio invested in active funds could give to the customer a much better result. But if this is the reality, and if we are paid, because this is the reality, I mean, it's the most common solution in Europe. If we are paid through inducements we receive from the product we recommend and offer to our client, how are we able to manage our conflict of interest? And who is going to pay the enormous amount of time you have to spend in order to do analysis, to make simulation, assessment, in order to select the best available products and instruments for your customers? Why don't we think about passing from rebates implied remuneration to advisory fees, fee-only advisory? And actually, the reform which started last year in Europe, the one which is called MiFID II, introduced a new kind of advisory activity, which is called independent advisory. But in order to call your activity independent, you must have two preconditions. One is to offer a very large range of instruments and products. Otherwise, you cannot say to the customers that you are offering independent advisory. And second condition, which is even more important, you shouldn't get any rebates. You should be paid just with fees directly by your customer. And what is happening? The people starting thinking about organizing the advisory services based on fees directly paid by the customer. How do they price these fees? According to the different portfolio you offer to the customers and according to the size of the portfolio the customer is asking you to offer advisory for. Here you have an example. As you can see, higher is the percentage of risky assets, and for risky assets we mean equity, alternatives, global bonds, emerging markets. Higher is the percentage of these risky assets in the client's portfolio, higher is the fee you can ask. And bigger is the size of the portfolio the client is asking you to take care, lower is the amount of the percentage. So you get this kind of matrix which allow you to understand how much is the price the people are using at European level in order to offer fee-based approach. Some customers are also asking you not to pay just normal fees for the advisory activity, but to share the results between the advisor and the clients. In this case, you can add a kind of a performance fee if you are able to outperform the benchmark, and in that case, you lower a little bit the fee just asked for advisory services, but on the other side, you ask for a part of the performance exceeding the benchmark. If you compare the two matrices, you see that 20 basis points less is the amount you ask on the fees if you accept to get a performance fee. Just a very quick practical example. Here you have a portfolio of a customer. Let's assume that they have 15% of equity Europe, 15% of equity USA, 5 equity Pacific, 5 emerging markets equity, and then some bond and money market instruments. The same portfolio, I ran a simulation supposing that we are still offering the same portfolio with the inducement-based approach, based on rebates, and in the lower part of the slides, the same portfolio with a fee-based approach. Of course, the underlying instruments will be completely different. If you are based, if your service, if your advisory service is based on rebates, of course you will offer just mutual funds, or mainly mutual funds. In fact, 94% of the portfolio is invested in mutual funds and only 6% in ETF or passive funds. No part of the portfolio is invested in single bond or single stock because nobody is going to pay this work to research and to offer single bonds on single stock investments. In this case, the customer is going to pay 1.90, which is then 150 for the cost of the products underlying the portfolio, management fees, plus 0.40 related to $0.40 related to custody and trading fees. So on one side we have the customer paying 190, and on the other side we have the distributor or the advisor getting just 0.90. Where is 0.90 coming from? Just 60%, which is already a high percentage, 60% of the management fee of the product underlying the portfolio. The second example on the same portfolio with the same customers, it's completely different. It relates to advisory fee, explicit fee, paid directly by the customers. The underlying instruments are completely different. This time we have 24% only of mutual funds. The real active mutual funds are able to beat the benchmark. We have 36% of ETF and passive funds, and 40% on single bonds and single stock. In this case, the total expense the client is going to pay is 160, made by 110 of advisory fee paid directly by the customers, and 0.50 of total cost of underlying instruments. Of course, the underlying cost is much less because we get a higher percentage of single stock and single bonds and ETF or passive funds. So this is a clear example on how is the consequence of passing from a rebate-based approach to a fee-only approach. The customer is going to pay a little bit less, and advisor is getting a bit more. So that's the provocation I wanted to launch on this audience, because I know that today you will discuss about how is going on the future of investment advisory activity, and we as EFPA are very much interested in getting some inputs from you. Thanks a lot.